A pressure campaign spearheaded by Senator Bernie Sanders led to one pharmaceutical company backing off of their plans to price gouge Americans, which is great news. Now, Sanders is the head of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee in the Senate, of course, and has the power to call for hearings and investigations into the healthcare industry and big pharma. And so here's the issue at play. Here's what fired him up and what ended up happening when he decided to apply pressure. Moderna had recently announced that they plan to increase the price of the coronavirus vaccine. So that would increase the price of the shots from $110 to $130 a dose. The price, of course, has been nothing, zero, because the federal government had been purchasing the shots on behalf of Americans so Americans can get it for free. They were purchasing the shots for $26 from Moderna. And then you would go to a CVS or a Walgreens or wherever you got your vaccine and you'd get the shot without having to pay for it. Now, of course, the COVID-related emergency measures are going to expire. And at that point, the federal government's gonna do nothing for you, pretty much. And so Moderna was planning on using that as an opportunity to increase their prices for the vaccine. But Bernie Sanders was like, no, I'm not down with that. And here's why. Sanders said Moderna, whose only federally approved drug is the coronavirus vaccine that the company received nearly $2 billion in direct federal money to develop, is a poster child for the greed of the pharmaceutical industry. He plans to argue that the CEO, Stefan Bancel, who Forbes estimates is worth $5 billion, and several other Moderna executives profited off the pandemic. And that's actually true. Also, fun fact, the CEO sold more than $400 million in company stock from the start of the pandemic through March of 2022. The COVID vaccine, I should note, is literally currently Moderna's only commercially available product. So that's the only way the company's really making a lot of money. And so him selling stocks like this, I think is telling. But anyway, Cenk.
Yeah, so look, there's three set of facts that lead to one another. First of all, how much money do these companies spend in lobbying these politicians? So over the past 25 years, the pharmaceutical industry has spent $8.5 billion on lobbying. 8.5 billion. That's not on a product, that's on lobbying politicians to do what they want. So they must be getting a lot of money in return. Hold, we're gonna show you how much they're gonna get. And they also spent another $745 million on campaign contributions. Those are the legalized bribes they just hand to the politicians, let alone all that lobbying effort, which is a lot of times gets funneled to their actual bank accounts, right? My wife, my son happens to be a lobbyist. There's 1,000 different tricks. In fact, this one industry has 1,700 lobbyists. There's only 535 members of Congress. So 3 times as many lobbyists for this one industry as members of Congress.
That's right.
Okay, so all that lobbying, what does it get them? Well, first of all, in the case of Moderna, not true for all the pharmaceutical companies that did the vaccine, but in Moderna's case, well, the government did the research and handed them a couple of $1 billion of research for free.
Yes.
Right? So you'd spend a couple of $100 million lobbying too if you're gonna get a couple billion back. But hold, that's just the tip of the iceberg. We extend their patents and that allows them to have literally monopolies in markets. And there's so many other ways that the government helps them, including not being able to negotiate drug prices at Medicare. It's unheard of in capitalism that you can't negotiate drug or the price of anything, right? So how much money have they made between 2000 and 2018? The pharmaceutical companies in this country alone, 8 trillion in profits, not revenue, profits, 8 trillion. Well, that's what happens when you have a monopoly and you could charge ridiculous prices. In fact, in this particular case, in the COVID vaccine, Anna told you it costs, they were trying to charge $130 per shot, right? You know how much it costs? $2.85 to manufacture.
I mean, they're just so ridiculous. I mean, this is what they do. This is if they can buy the politicians and game the system, they're gonna do it, and that's what's been happening. Except there's one politician who has proven over and over again that he can't be bought, and that's Senator Bernie Sanders, who is now the head of this incredibly important committee within the Senate. And so he tells the Washington Post this, and I just love the way he simply states the reality of how corporations screw us over in this country. We're going to ask them, he says, when he's referring to the hearing, hey, you made billions of dollars in profit on a vaccine that was developed because of taxpayer support from the National Institutes of Health. You've become a multi-billionaire and you think it's appropriate to cost the federal government even more money by quadrupling prices? Now, here's the other thing I wanted to mention. So Moderna didn't like the pressure campaign. And so they decided to concede to Sanders, okay? So let's get to that, all right? On Wednesday, after its CEO did agree to appear in front of the committee in the Senate, he said that they will provide millions of uninsured and underinsured Americans the vaccine free of cost. And then he says, a spokesperson for Moderna says this, everyone in the United States will have access to Moderna's COVID-19 vaccines regardless of their ability to pay. And then they made the argument that for those who are insured, they'll be covered by their insurance, right? Except Bernie Sanders made such a perfect point. He's like, yeah, except for those who are on Medicare. Because remember, Medicare is funded by the taxpayers. So if Medicare is paying for the vaccine, at the end of the day, it's still the taxpayers who are paying for the vaccine.
Yeah. So how did Bernie do it? How did he get this company to back down and go from trying to charge $130 per shot to $0 per shot? I mean, that is a hell of a thing. I thought, oh my God, they need this money, otherwise you just can't stay in business, right? That's the excuses they use. They use an excuse like, we need that extra money for innovation in the drug industry. You have 8 trillion in profits. How does that not cover innovation, right? So what Bernie did was he pointed out their salaries, not just their profits, okay, but he said that the top 50 executives in the 10 pharmaceutical companies made $1.9 billion in compensation and stock awards.
Oh my God.
Okay, and then they also have golden parachutes when they leave. I mean, do you guys get this at your job? When they fire you or you leave,
I freaking better.
They give you a golden parachute. They're like, oh, okay, thank you for working here. You're fired, but here's $30 million. Right?
I mean, I'll take a bronze parachute.
Okay, right. So how much are these guys going to get? Now remember, there's just 50 executives. Their golden parachutes, when they leave, amount to more than $2.8 billion.
That seems fair, yeah.
Okay, so when he started talking about the billions that the executives are taking and stuffing to their pockets by overcharging us, all of a sudden, and called them in front of the committee. Now the guy's gonna have to say it in front of the TV cameras, right? And he naturally thinks, rightfully thinks, hey man, this is a robbery well done. I don't, the extra billion I would make is not that important. I just got to protect the billions I already made. Okay, forget it. It's free.
Right.
It's free, right?
And look, I want to be clear. If you're one of those people who unfortunately has been propagandized into thinking that you shouldn't get the vaccine, it's not just about the vaccine. Because this is something, this issue has been replicated over and over and over again with all sorts of life-saving prescription drugs. The taxpayers fund the research and development for the drugs. The pharmaceutical companies benefit from it. They turn around and price gouge us on the incredibly important life-saving medications that we need. It happens over and over and over again. My mom was diagnosed with blood cancer just last year. She needed to take a chemo medication known as Revlimid. Revlimid was founded decades and decades and decades ago. But the federal government, which is completely captured by the pharmaceutical companies, kept extending the patent. Extending. Luckily, they finally allowed for one other company to create a generic version of it, but there's only 2 companies producing this life-saving drug that my mom needs. Her body doesn't produce, her bone marrow doesn't produce hemoglobin. Without it, she's gone. And the cost out of pocket, okay, Medicare didn't cover it entirely, $2,500 a month for that drug, okay?
Yeah.
It's disgusting. It's what we see happening with all sorts of drugs. And Bernie Sanders holding this guy's feet to the fire, again, isn't just about the vaccine. It's about making a statement about how things work in this country, how the corruption leads to this robbery of the American people. And then one final thing I'll say, you should really compare Democrats and Republicans when it comes to the investigations they're prioritizing. So when you go to the House of Representatives, which is now dominated by Republicans, they're gonna do investigations too. on Hunter Biden's laptop.
Yeah.
Okay. In the Senate, you have Bernie Sanders doing investigations and hearings of pharmaceutical companies that have been screwing you over for decades. Okay, Bill Cassidy, who's a Republican from Louisiana, says this. The ranking Republican on his committee, Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, told the Washington Post this month that he wanted to hear more from Pfizer and Moderna before passing judgment on their decisions to hike prices.
In other words, I get paid by them and I'm gonna protect them.
Bingo.
There isn't a single Republican senator who isn't a crook. They all take millions in campaign contributions and represent those corporations instead of you guys. By the way, that's also true of the majority of Democrats. Okay, so that leads me to my final 2 points. Look, on top of being a talk show host here, I run the company, so I'm a businessman, so I know how this works, okay? So you're supposed to try to hit a 15% margin so that you can be sustainable, et cetera. You get a 25% margin, you do run a great business. Congrats, brother, you did well, right? That price hike from $2.85 to $130, you know what the profit margin on that is? Not the price hike, but the fact that it cost them only $2.85 and they wanted to charge $130. That's a 4,500% margin. That's not capitalism. No one can get a 4,500% return on investment. No one could have that kind of margin unless you've captured the government. And then at that point, the government helps protect your outrageous price gouging of the American people. And what did Biden do? So of course Trump, when he was campaigning, said, "Oh, I'm gonna make sure that Medicare negotiates drug prices." And then he got in office. He said, "Oh no, I'm not doing that, man. It turns out they give a lot of money to me, right?" And what did Biden do? "Oh, I'm gonna." And Obama, same thing. "Oh, I'm gonna make sure they're gonna negotiate drug prices." Liars. They're all liars. And instead, he came in and he regulated insulin for only people on Medicare and 9 other drugs, like what is it, 3-4 years from now, okay? And the thousands of other drugs. He's like, don't touch the beloved pharmaceutical companies. We're gonna protect their profits and pretend we did something when all we did was a smokescreen to help them out. Who's the only guy who actually fights for you and gets things done? Bernie Sanders. And so he single-handedly did this.
Yeah.
And what do we tell you guys all the time? Public pressure works. The reason we tell the progressive legislators and everybody else to pick a fight is not because of histrionics. It's because it creates public pressure, right? And that actually focuses people's attention. It gets the people in power nervous and they back off, okay? This is a perfect case study in it. By the way, even to Bernie though, public pressure against your colleagues would also work. So I love what you're doing with the companies. Thank you for being the only person in Washington representing us and getting results. But if you turn that ire towards your corrupt colleagues, you would get 10 times the results, 100 times the results. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR, so those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.